Milley is now trying to claim that his calls with China were shared with the intelligence community. Well, former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, he joins us. He says that's not true. Here to explain more, the man himself, former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. The Defense Secretary has now come out publicly and said that he did not give permission, did not give an order for Milley to make such a phone call to his counterpart in China. Did he, in fact, you were the Director of National Intelligence at the time, sir, did you, in fact, give any go-ahead, have any knowledge of any of this with General Milley?
Sean, no. Very clearly, what has been reported is that on October 30th of 2020, which would have been 5 days before the presidential election, that this call took place between General Milley and one of the Chinese generals that he considered his counterpart. Now, remember, Sean, 5 days before the election, I can tell you the intelligence community was focused on making sure that China and other countries were not interfering with that upcoming election. And we had good basis to be concerned about China's actions. So I can tell you that if at that point in time I had been advised that our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time that we were defending against China was reaching out to provide reassurance about our conduct here in the United States, I can promise you that I would have remembered that, and it would have prompted a very specific action by me that involved Chairman Milley and President Trump. So unequivocally, that didn't take place. To the second issue, and that I think is important here with respect to General Milley, to make sure that you're characterizing it accurately, Sean, with regard to this issue of his actions on the president's nuclear strike capability, essentially what he has acknowledged through a spokesman today is that a meeting did take place along those lines, that there was some sort of a stand-down order. And to that point, as you correctly pointed out, Sean, in your monologue, you know, we have a unitary form of government, and the president is the commander-in-chief by law, and it can't be the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff under any circumstances. So if, in fact, this is true, what General Milley did was insert himself in a chain of command which the Constitution prohibits, and then circumvented that chain of command to get pledges from people to stand down from a duly authorized authority of the one commander-in-chief, the President of the United States. And as you have pointed out, if in fact that is true, then those would be individual counts of insubordination, and the appropriate, action would be, a court-martial proceeding.
Mr. Ratcliffe, let me ask you this. If that chain of custody and command were circumvented, and everybody in that meeting, according to this book, gave an affirmative answer that they understood what Milley was saying, which is to break the chain of command, of which he's not a part of, wouldn't they all then temporarily need to be on administrative leave pending the results of a commission report?
Well, again, very clearly, that's why I agree with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about the need to really look specifically at this issue. This goes to the core of, we have a unitary executive under our Constitution. And, what we have here in the case of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is apparently, as you pointed out, Sean, acting kind of like Jim Comey did a few months ago, which is to say, I'm better than the Constitution. I'm smarter than the Constitution. I know more, and I'm going to save the Republic. And so, unfortunately, that's what needs to be looked at here, because what has been outlined by this reporting, and again, it needs to be verified, but he put a spokesperson out today to at least verify some of it, very clearly runs afoul of the Constitution and a unitary executive. And if that is the case, then, I didn't think things could get worse for General Milley than when he ignored the intelligence on the ground that resulted in the tragic deaths of 13 Americans in Afghanistan and the most humiliating, degrading surrender and defeat that our military has suffered in our lifetime. But it is getting worse for him based on this reporting.
Milley is claiming that his calls with China to his counterpart, he is claiming that they were shared with the intelligence community. Do you have any recollection in any way whatsoever that information was shared with the intelligence community?
Again, to be clear, The idea that we would have been giving reassurance to China about our conduct at a point where we were concerned about China's interference in our election. And again, this first phone call was reported to have taken place on October 30th, 2020, 5 days before our presidential election. That simply didn't happen. I mean, the phone call may have happened, but the idea that was coordinated and shared, and again, I was the head of the intelligence community, Sean, it would have prompted a very specific course of action involving both General Milley and President Trump, because I frankly would have found it to be shocking and inappropriate and frankly unconstitutional. And you've now heard the acting Secretary of Defense, weigh in on this as well and say that, simply there was no order or authority for this as well.
Woodward and Costa claim among the evidence that they have to put this story in their upcoming book that they have transcripts. Would there be transcripts available? And should they be made public immediately?
There would be transcripts. I mean, obviously there's a standard out there that the Democrats put in place with respect to Donald Trump and transcripts that relate to national security and how people should see those.
Yeah. Let me ask you a last question about Nancy Pelosi's role. If Nancy Pelosi in any way conspired with General Milley to somehow prevent the president from upholding his constitutional duty and authority that is clearly stated, there's no ambiguity about being commander-in-chief, what would that mean for her?
Well, I think Nancy Pelosi should be held to the same standards under the law and Constitution that she applied to President Trump. It would have been appropriate for her to have a phone call and take a phone call with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. But if there was planning and plotting along the way that was reported by the Washington Post, they would both have culpability and liability under the law.
All right, Director Ratcliffe, thank you for being with us. When we come back.